Well, good morning, everyone. What an amazing day this is today. Just an amazing day. But it's an amazing day because we're going to bring the PACT Act to the floor of the House of Representatives. I'm so glad you all could join us. This is the week we've all been waiting for. This is the day we've been waiting for. After years of diligent input from my colleagues, our staff, VA, VSOs, and toxic exposed veterans themselves, the best version of our Honoring Our PACT Act will be considered on the House floor. Without hesitation, our veterans raised their right hand to protect and defend this nation, and many are now sick as a result of that service. We made a pact with these individuals. A pact, I'm afraid to say, we have not yet honored. Tomorrow we have an opportunity to change that and pass the bipartisan Honoring Our PACT Act. Our bill will address the full gamut of issues affecting toxic exposed veterans' access to VA care and benefits while reforming VA's presumptive decision-making process. It will open up VA health care for more than 3.5 million veterans exposed to burn pits and establish a presumption of service connection for over 23 respiratory illnesses and cancers. There is no other toxic exposure legislation in Congress like it in scope or soundness. And with the support of 42 veteran service organizations and 100 co-sponsors, we have the momentum. I want to thank President Biden for devoting so much time to veterans in the State of the Union last night. He recognizes the urgent need to pass truly comprehensive legislation. I've said it many times, but when we send our service members into harm's way, we do so with a promise that we will care for them when they come home and pay for that service. Actually, pay for that care. If we are to support the cost of starting and sustaining war, we must acknowledge the financial cost of supporting those veterans it creates when it comes home. We cannot renege on our responsibility because of sticker shock. We have a moral obligation to America's veterans. For all my colleagues readying for the vote tomorrow, I have a simple question. Do you support our troops, and will you honor your promise to them? Without hesitation, I know I will honor my promise to our toxic exposed veterans. And with that, I would like to introduce the chairwoman of our DAMA subcommittee, Representative Elaine Luria of the state of Virginia.
Well, thank you, Chairman Takano. I want to thank you for your leadership on this issue, and along with all of our colleagues on the Veterans Affairs Committee, I can assure you that this is the #1 priority of our committee, and you will see tomorrow that this is a priority of the United States Congress to take care of our veterans. As a 20-year veteran myself, as someone who represents a district where nearly 1 out of every 6 people is a veteran, we've heard so many stories. We've heard it from veterans themselves, from their surviving family members, from the 42 VSOs who've joined together with us today in this effort to take care of our veterans. And this is long, long overdue. Just last Congress, we passed legislation to help those Vietnam-era Blue Water Navy veterans. And we cannot stand to let something like this linger for 40 to 50 years before we get that health care to these veterans who need it today. I want to thank the chairman and the committee for including in this package of legislation the Covenant Act, which helps those veterans, which creates the presumption, which includes those key diseases that we know that people are suffering from the exposure to burn pits, as well as legislation included in here to modernize the VA, to bring them into the 21st century, to simply allow veterans to be notified electronically of their disability determinations and their access to health care. So this is monumental legislation, and I want to thank the chairman. I want to thank President Biden as well for making this as a focus of his address to the nation, because we care about our veterans, and this legislation will help so many of them get the health care that they deserve. I'd now like to introduce my colleague, Representative Dr. Raul Ruiz, who has also been a leader in this fight, and thank you for your hard work on this effort.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman. And because our very esteemed leader in Congress, Speaker Pelosi, is here, I'm going to step aside and invite Speaker Pelosi to come and give her remarks.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Raul. Thank you for your leadership in putting together pieces of this bill as well. You have been a leader on this as a physician, as a patriot, as one who has served our men and women in uniform. And it's an honor to be here with Elaine Luria, Congresswoman Luria, who has served our country so well in uniform, and now she serves in the Congress of the United States for those in uniform and those who have served us. Thank you, Elaine Luria. I join you in saluting Mark Takano in his leadership in bringing this legislation to the floor. It's very significant. And thank you, Jon Stewart, for your, wherever you may be, participation in this. When I was thinking this morning I saw you all on TV, I was remembering this was a long time ago, about 40 years ago. I was with Dick Gregory when we were sitting with veterans who were doing a hunger strike because of Agent Orange. It was in Los Angeles, and Dick Gregory was teaching them how to have a hunger strike and be safe, and again, lifting their spirits. And thank you for lifting everyone's spirits and calling attention, as he did, to this charge. It took us decades to do Agent Orange. We could not let any more time go by before we address this burn pits issue. I was so excited to see, you know, the most expensive real estate in Washington, D.C., it's like 1 inch in the State of the Union address to just get that piece in there. And the president spent so much time on this important, not issue, value for us. So again, I want to thank Chief Melanchek, to Katie Purswell, Shane Learman, Jack McManus, Jen Birch, and of course Jon Stewart. But I also want to thank Paul Reichart, who has been on our case with this for such a while. But again, Mr. Chairman, thank you. As you all know, our saying when we're dealing with our veterans, on the battlefield we leave no soldier behind, and when they come home we leave no veteran behind. But we have, and we can't. And if there's one point I would like to make here, in addition to saluting our veterans, is to say this is a cost of war. Don't even talk to us about the price. This is a cost of war that we should recognize when we go. And that is, there should be no question, because this is going to be, it's not going to be expensive, it's going to be worth it. But it's going to have a big price tag. It's coming down because of the better review we're getting from the Congressional Budget Office. But when it comes up, I don't want anybody bringing up the dollar amount, because what we are looking at is the value of what this does for our country. And thank you for putting in the Camp Lejeune Justice Act in here, because it's not just only about our veterans, it's about their families. And when you meet the families and see generationally the toll that it has taken because of what's in the water, what has been in the water there. So for these and other reasons, this PACT Act is something that is long overdue, just a cause of great excitement. And I salute the President again for making such an issue, a focus on it last night, so that the American people could have a better understanding of what the hope this is that gives people. Again, I thank you for the Blue Water Navy Vietnam Veterans Act that took so long for us to make sure that so many other people were covered. Your chairmanship made that possible, Mr. Chairman. Today on the floor, I'll talk about Sergeant Wesley Brack, a Purple Heart hero and advocate for PACT. He died from all of this. He said, and what he said, it's too late for me, but it's not too late for the next veteran who walks down the hall at the VA and goes in and complains about signs and symptoms. Today, as we pass the Honor Our PACT Act, we honor our duty, and we honor the memory of so many for whom it is too late, but also making the case that it's never too late to save the lives of our veterans. With that, I yield back to the distinguished Dr., Congressman, friend of veterans, Raul Ruiz. Thank you, Raul. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker Pelosi. Thank you, Chairman Mark Takano. I'm Congressman Dr. Raul Ruiz, and I represent California's 36th Congressional District. I'm an emergency medicine physician, a public health expert, and founder and co-chair of the bipartisan, bicameral Congressional Burn Pits Caucus. Before I get started, I'd like to first thank all of the incredible veterans, the VSOs and families who are joining us here today, and especially the widows of those who have lost a loved one due to their exposure to burn pits. You are the reasons why we're here today. So thank you for your service and sacrifice to our nation. I also want to thank Chairman Takano, Congresswoman Luria for their leadership in our committee, and the incredible advocates. So many advocates, so many to name. I'll name the advocates that will be speaking as well. Rosie Torres, who I met many years ago. And when I came in and started this fight after the death of Jennifer Kepner, and I'll tell you about her, it was Rosie Torres who was there. It was Rosie Torres fighting against the stream. It was Rosie Torres who said, do not forget our veterans. It was Rosie Torres who fought the bureaucracy from the very beginning, and it was Rosie Torres who visited my district to provide comfort to the veterans in my district during my Veterans University. And of course, and that was a time when burn pits was not a very popular conversation here in Congress and in other places in our nation. And of course, throughout the years, screaming from the rooftops, organizing, as Speaker Pelosi likes to say, we didn't agonize, we organized, and we got the word out, and we had a rocket boost of attention by John Field and John Stewart's leadership as well, and their partnership to really boost us into the next stratosphere to make sure that we get the job done. So I stand here before all of you in the name of Jennifer Kepner, a 38-year-old Air Force veteran, health nut, ran miles in the morning, took care of herself day in, day out, served as a medic in Balad Air Force Base in Iraq. No other risk factors. And when I met with her in her kitchen table, she told me that her epidemiologist diagnosed the pancreatic cancer most likely due to her exposure to carcinogens from the toxic fumes of burn pits during her service. And as she was cachectic, loss of hair, with a port in her chest, and talking to me, she asked for two things. And this is the heart and soul of our veterans. One, do not allow my experience of denials and delays to happen to other veterans. Still, off the battlefield, she was taking care of other veterans. And she said, please, Congressman. She had been denied her benefits. She said, please, Congressman, help my husband, Ben, get the benefits so he can take care of our children. She died months later. And I got that terrible call that she was dying, and I immediately left my office, went to her home where she was dying with her family. And you can imagine the tears of her mother, the tears of her daughter not understanding what was going on, and her son too young to even know what was happening, just seeing his mother lay there. And it is in her name and the name of Leroy Torres and the name of all the veterans and the human stories of sacrifice, the dedication to our countries, and all the delayed casualties of war due to the self-inflicted wound by the Department of Defense in using these burn pits and the toxic fumes that they inhaled, that we carry this cause and carry this banner and ensure that there will be no Agent Orange experience that our Vietnam veterans experienced for our veterans today. And it is because of Jennifer Kepner that I started the bicameral, bipartisan burn pits years ago. And it is because of Jennifer Kepner and all the veterans here that we took a very comprehensive public health approach to deal with this problem. A 4-pillar approach. 1 is stop the use of burn pits. 2 is provide the information to the doctors and the veterans about the health risk so they can better take care of veterans and veterans can take care of themselves. 3, give the care and benefits to the veterans and their families that they've earned and that they deserve and that they need right now. And 4, do more research, not to prove that a carcinogen can cause cancer, not to prove that toxic metals in your lung can cause fibrosis in your lungs. We know that. But to understand fully the full gamut of the array of diseases that can leave and render a veteran 100% disabled on oxygen or dying from cancers. All of that and those different pieces. We took pieces through amendments, through the Department of Defense, the NDAA, any which way we could to advance the agenda to help our veterans. And we've introduced 10 legislation, gotten 6 bills, enhancing the registry, doing all these different things. But this bill, this Honoring Our PACT, is the most comprehensive bill that addresses all those 4 pillars of our public health approach to protect our veterans. And it includes the pivotal heart and soul of this bill for burn pits, which is the presumptive benefits for war fighters exposed to burn pits and other toxins act that I introduced in the House, Senator Gillibrand in the Senate, but it was written, contrived, and thought through by all of these wonderful individuals here whose heart and minds and experiences is written all over the pages through the inks of their sacrifice and their pain, and that is why we introduced this bill. You see, it is the heart and soul of this legislation to give burn pits exposed veterans the care that they have earned and deserve by establishing a presumption of service connection between their health and toxic exposures. And this is key, because you will hear that there are other pieces of legislation that could easily get signed and passed into law. Those without a presumption of service is a farce and a slap in the face to the experience of Vietnam veterans who experienced Agent Orange, and the slap of the face of these VSO individuals who want services now. We cannot delay, and we will not delay until they're dead. We will take care of them now. And so we need that presumption of service-related illnesses due to burn pits. And that is why we need to pass our Honoring Our PACT Act, because that is our promise to take care of our veterans. You see, their exposure, their risk didn't end when they left Iraq or Afghanistan, because they are still dying. They are still dying from the changes in their lungs, from the pathology that they're experiencing. They're still suffering from the shortness of breath and the weakness and fatigue, from the chemotherapy that they're taking, and the cancer that can ultimately take their lives. So last night, after several conversations with the White House, we had an incredible response from the President of the United States, who mentioned burn pits and the need to finally take care of this once and for all, and urged our colleagues on the other aisle and urged them to step up in a bipartisan way to serve our veterans and honor our pact to them. And as we were leaving, I spoke to him. I thanked him for mentioning burn pits, immigration reform as well, but burn pits. And he mentioned his son's name. And I mentioned Jennifer Kepner's name. Both of them served in the same base in Iraq. And I believe and I hope that every American in our country internalizes this struggle, humanizes this struggle, to understand if it was your son and daughter who has been exposed, to understand that if it's your neighbor and if it's your relative, to understand that there are widows, to understand that there are children without parents, to understand that our country must honor our promise and honor our pact today. And that is why I call on every member of Congress, Democrats, Republican, and I call on the Senate to pass the Honoring Our PACT Act. And I thank the Speaker for her leadership and her passion. And with that, I want to invite VFW Chief Fritz Melzik. Fritz is fine. Fritz is fine.
How about those remarks, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you. Good morning. My name is Fritz Mihelchek, and I'm the National Commander of the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States. And I'd like to thank Chairman Mark Takano for championing the Honor Our PACT Act. What an outstanding feat. And to you, Speaker Pelosi, thank you for your support on this critical issue. Thank you. There have been many toxic exposure bills introduced in this Congress. The VFW has asked that several of them be combined to finally address the problem of toxic exposure and airborne hazards during military service. Congress listened. Chairman Takano introduced the Honoring Our PACT Act, and 100 co-sponsors have shown their support. Speaker Pelosi has been an ardent supporter. And just last night we heard our president loud and clear that veterans suffering from toxic exposures must have adequate care. The Honoring Our PACT Act is a comprehensive solution that will provide relief. This historic legislation will help millions of veterans by establishing a permanent presumptive framework to address any toxic exposure, foreign or domestic, past, present, and future. It would provide VA health care for all veterans exposed to hazards. It would create a concession of exposure for airborne toxins by removing the burden of proof on our veterans. And it will establish a list of presumptive conditions associated with burn pits and other exposures. This comprehensive legislation will help post 9/11 veterans, Gulf War veterans, K2 veterans, atomic veterans, and the Vietnam veterans, including those who also served in Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos. There is a cost of war, but that also includes the cost of peace. Our service members answered the call of their country, and it is America's responsibility to care for them, even after the guns fall silent. The PACT Act is the VFW's top legislative priority. We urge the House and the Senate to swiftly pass the Honoring Our PACT Act because the time is now to do the right thing. At this time, I would like to introduce from the American Legion, Ms. Katie Purswell. Katie?
Hi, good morning. My eyes burned. It was hard to take a deep breath when I coughed, and it made my chest hurt and it made me cough. I choked on the odor from the winds when they would pick up. After a while, I started waking up with bloody noses. It was difficult and painful to breathe. After I got home, I had bronchitis for a year. I don't think my run time has ever recovered. I just can't take a deep breath anymore. These are just some of the effects our Legionnaires have described from toxic exposure. As one of our Legionnaires who served in Iraq and Afghanistan as a crew chief on a C-130 told us, every naval aviator and air crew that flew at night using their night vision goggles will never forget the sight of bright green bird pits as far as the eye can see. It could have been from a movie. It should have been from a movie. This is a movie we've seen before. Regrettably, the conversation of toxic exposure is not new to the American Legion or to VA. The American Legion has fought for decades and continues to fight for the service-connected disability benefits from Agent Orange and other toxic exposures from Vietnam. Over 3.5 million veterans have deployed in support of the global war on terror. I struggle to think of a single person that I deployed with that was not exposed to some form of toxin. While it was our decision to raise our hands and to fight our nation's wars for those who cannot or will not, what we didn't know was that our long-lasting health issues might not even begin to show while we're in service. From burn pits to black goo in areas from Balad to Kandahar, the extent of damage done to us will not be known for decades. The American Legion will not stand idly by and allow the delay of health care for our nation's veterans happen again. We urge Congress to vote yes on H.R. 3967, the Honoring Our PACT Act of 2021. We cannot wait decades for this generation of warfighters. We must learn from our mistakes and act now. I would like to introduce my friend Shane Learman from DAV at this time. Thank you.
Good morning. On behalf of DAV's more than 1 million members, we thank Speaker Pelosi and Chairman Takano for the opportunity today to urge the House to pass the Honoring Our PACT Act. This truly is a historic moment because, Congress, you have the chance to pass the most comprehensive toxic exposure legislation ever considered. But it's even more than that. It will provide health care to the men and women exposed to toxins in many locations around the world, to include those who served in the Persian Gulf War. This will establish diseases linked to those exposures, as well as additional diseases for Vietnam veterans exposed to Agent Orange, and concede that use in other locations around the world. The Honoring Our PACT Act will also expand radiation risk activities for those who cleaned up radiation sites at Eniwetok Atoll and Palermo, Spain. Additionally, this will require registries and studies for those who served and were exposed to toxins at Fort McClellan and those who were exposed to PFAS contaminated water. The Honoring Our PACT Act is a multi-generational piece of legislation that will save lives, provide health care and benefits, but it's even more than that. It's about a promise. When we served this nation, we made a promise, took an oath, that we would defend this nation. We believed that promise was going to be reciprocated by our nation and take care of us when we came home. Unfortunately, many generations of veterans have seen broken promises, like Vietnam veterans. We have the opportunity today, Congress, our nation has the opportunity to keep the promise to America's veterans and pass the Honoring Our PACT Act without delay. Thank you. I would like to introduce my colleague, Jen Birch from IAVA.
I want to thank Chairman Takano and Speaker Pelosi for their leadership on the Honoring Our PACT Act. When I deployed to Kandahar, Afghanistan 11 years ago, the last thoughts in my mind were the health impacts from the burn pits just a few hundred yards away. We all saw them, but at the time we were just trying to survive the deployment and get home safely. When I returned from my deployment, I went straight from the airport to the hospital. I was incredibly sick and would eventually get diagnosed with bronchitis and pneumonia, also known as the Afghanistan crud. Several months later, I would move from Okinawa, Japan to Buckley Air Force Base in Colorado, where my symptoms from toxic exposure really started to emerge. For the next several years, where before my deployment I was an avid runner, I would have to stop running after a very short time because of shortness of breath. I had many more health problems, and like a car with a check engine light on, I was essentially falling apart, physically and mentally, month by month. I became severely depressed and caught up in my post-traumatic stress from serving as a volunteer medic at the trauma hospital in Kandahar, and would eventually try to take my life in 2013 and land myself in a hospital for 2 weeks. About 3 years later, a ground glass nodule was found in my lung, and I was immediately scanned for cancer. Thankfully, it was benign. The doctors also found that I had major pleural thickening and chronic bronchiolitis. I would go to the ER over 30 times in the next few years for numerous problems before being medically retired from the Air Force in 2014. I had continuous medical problems afterwards, and now that I was out of the military, I would start paying thousands of dollars in care. I didn't have a toxic exposure disability rating with the VA, although before I had left the service, it was determined my health was on the decline because of toxic exposure. It took 7 years and thousands of dollars to finally get a toxic exposure disability with a diagnosis of restrictive lung disease. I had to be my own advocate, lawyer, and social worker to build my own case to prove to the VA of why I was in need of these benefits and health care. I now have to get my lungs scanned every other year to make sure the nodule doesn't turn into cancer, though since my initial diagnosis, it has doubled in size. After 7 years, I turned out to be one of the lucky ones when I finally got my disability. Sadly, nearly 80% of veterans get denied health care and benefits. The war may be over on the battlefield, but the war combating the health and wellness ramifications of the battle has just begun. The emergence of these impacts will become more visible as time goes on, just like it did for Vietnam veterans and veterans from every other war, past, current, and future. There is a battle at home to be fought to ensure those who volunteer to serve their country are taken care of no matter the cost. We service members wrote a blank check to our nation. We are not asking for the same in return, only what is owed to us. The care and services needed to address the injuries we sustained while in service, those visible and invisible. We must not put any more lives in danger waiting for a bureaucratic system to catch up. The time to act is now, for the sake of our current veterans and those who will follow. This is why Congress must pass the comprehensive legislation honoring our PACT Act that will provide presumption, healthcare, and framework for new illnesses. The burden of proof must no longer be on the veteran. And last but not least, my friend, Jon Stewart.
Let me get, before we get going, I'm going to call up Rosie Torres from Burn Pit 360. Rosie and John Feel are the ones who got me into this a few years back. Their tireless efforts are what helped lift this up. So Rosie, give you...
Thank you, John. Thank you to Speaker Pelosi, to Chairman Takano, to all the members of Congress, especially to John and John. Yes, you're right, Congressman Ruiz. More than a decade ago, I made a promise to my husband, Captain Leroy Torres, and a promise to the people who are this issue, who define what this issue is about, to the families of the fallen. So I will keep it short and just say that today we stand in solidarity with those families. And we ask Congress to stand in solidarity with those families. We ask that we pass the Honor Our PACT Act. We ask that this not be a partisan issue, that this be an American issue, and that we fulfill our moral obligation as Americans. So I will now read a list of names to honor the fallen. Matthew Kunn, Ian Keithley, Deborah Beckett, Ryan Mason, William Garza, John Sykes, Justin Kelly, Gary Hook, Will Thompson, David McCracken, Fred Slape, Jessica Sweet, James Hubbard, Wesley Black, Lauren Price, Heath Robinson, Jen Kepner, Amy Muller, Brian Batstibner, William Garza, Danielle Nienhadlo, Amanda Downing, Bill McKenna, Kevin Wilkins, Matthew Bumpus, Steve Ox, Jeffrey Wells, Nathan Earls, Aaron Barnes, Anthony Rounds, Ruben Vela, Dominic Caston, Brandon Maddock, John Charleston, Aaron Barnes, and Andrew Chasen.
What the president said last night was uplifting, positive, And it pumped new adrenaline into this group behind me. But they're just words. They're just words. And it's up to us to act on those words. We have a lot more work to do. The bill will get voted on tomorrow, and the bill will pass. The bill will pass. And there'll be silly members who vote against it because they're silly. We don't worry about that. Then it will go to the Senate. And there'll be silly members in the Senate who vote against us. But we'll get it done. This bill will save lives. Speaker, come here, please. Your legacy is cemented. This bill just cements your legacy even further. When John and I asked you for a meeting in November, you sat down with us for an hour. You kept your word the whole way. Chairman Takano kept his word the whole way. What we need to do now is to let everybody know that there's a 3-part bill in the Senate that is silly, that will not do what the PACT Act does. So I'm asking you now, because if I do it, Chuck's not going to like it. I'm asking you now to sit down with John and I and Senator Schumer. You're invited, Chairman.
Thank you.
Let Chuck know that we want a bill compatible to the Honor Our PACT Act. If he does not do that, then I will make his life miserable.
Oh, no.
I, a long time ago, before many of these people, raised my right hand to serve and protect. Before I was a 9/11 responder, I was a veteran. To serve and protect this country against silly people. Thank you.
I can attest, when John Field says he will make your life miserable, he has made my life very miserable. It's an honor to be here. You know, for those of you who have been here before, and I see a lot of familiar faces, you can feel the difference in this group. You can feel the energy that they have after years, hope. Last night, they were seen. The President of the United States saw their struggle. Rosie Torres, she'd been working on this for 12 years. Some of these veteran service organizations, they've been working on this since Vietnam. The learning curve of this country over how we treat our veterans when they come home for war is so painfully slow. The pace is unacceptable, and you feel it today, man. Hope. I've been waiting for this day, for them. We've been working with them for years to see their unity. Veterans from Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, Djibouti, Guam, all over the world. Trying to get the government to recognize that the true cost of war is the consequence of their service and sacrifice when they get home. And finally, they were seen last night. And I'm very sorry to do this, but may I ask you to come up for one moment? So this is Danielle Robinson. You know, she's been an advocate from Ohio. She's been out here fighting the fight. Her husband was Heath Robinson. She told me something about her husband, Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson, just now that makes me just feel like, damn, man, this has got to be. Would you mind sharing that?
Sure. As I was getting ready last night for all the events, I got a phone call from Columbus, Ohio. It was from the memorial company that we had to lay Heath Robinson's headstone. And they told me that his headstone was placed yesterday, the same day that I would be coming to Washington to honor him and honor all these veterans who have been suffering for so long, to get the care that they need to get the diagnoses that they need to get. So if that isn't a sign, I don't know what is.
I get such strength from these individuals, man, and it's so exciting to see that the obstacles that they have faced over all these years are starting to clear, that the boulder that they have carried and the burden that they've carried is finally getting towards the top of that hill. But make no mistake, we are at Congress. This is a place where what is necessary becomes what they can get away with. And we can't allow that to happen in this final moment of their fight. They're going to go on the floor tomorrow, and there's going to be an amendment. And that amendment from Ranking Member Bost is going to say, hey, all these veteran service organizations and all these active military members have come together with Chairman Takano and Speaker Pelosi and the President of the United States, and they have designed a bill that will comprehensively address the urgent need in the veterans community. And Ranking Member Bost's amendment is going to say, damn, that's good work. So why don't we just switch that out for 5 more years of health care? We good? Thanks, guys. We're good. Fuck that. Not happening. They get what they deserve, the comprehensive bill that addresses the urgent need in their community. And the Senate pulls the same shenanigans. And so once this is done, make no mistake, then the battle shifts to the Senate. And as you know, they are excellent at killing things that are necessary. And we cannot allow it to happen. And you cannot allow this feeling of unity and hope and finally being seen to dissipate. We need all of your help to put the pressure on to make sure that the comprehensive needs that they have are passed. The VA is starting to take notice. They're starting to create the process. The President has taken notice. This Congress has taken notice. And we will not rest until it's done. So I can't thank you guys enough for the inspiration you brought to me and the hope that you've brought to the veterans of this country, and not only the 3.5 that served in the war on terror, but since Vietnam and all that. This culture has to change. And you know what, man? If we can't bear the consequences of war, maybe we should consider not starting so many. Thank you.
Speaker, come on, we can take 2 questions. You know, I'm just reminded, just in this day and age, the gravitas of comedians these days, and the Jesus.
I lit this place on fire!
As I was saying, such gravitas from our comedians these days. So we have time for 2 questions. Leo. I have not yet had a chance to talk with him. I'm looking forward to the meeting with John Thiel and the Speaker. Any other questions? Anyone else? Well, that means the Speaker and I can... let me just say that Madam Speaker, I think the President asked us for $6.5 billion for Ukraine, which I gladly think we should get behind. Our Republican counterparts are, in a bidding war and wanting to look tougher and say, let's make it $10 billion. Where's the same spirit of one-upmanship when it comes to keeping our promises to our veterans? That's the question I pose, and we're off to the... Go ahead, Madam Speaker.
I want to say that, that around here sometimes people will say, it's not the price, it's the money. Well, we're saying it isn't about the money, it's about the value that we will get from this. And while I want to associate myself with John and John in their remarks, completely, John, in terms of how we would reject a you got it?
I don't know where the swear jar is down here. I'll kick in a 20, whatever.
There we go. But in any case, what I think that's the little perspective that you all know, but I just want to reinforce, and that is that on a regular basis we meet with our veteran service organizations. They tell us what their priorities are. And they have a long list, and we kept saying prioritize, as you know. And they have been on the forefront. Well, you talk about even before World War II, the American Legion was looking out for the veterans of World War II. The veterans of World War I were looking out for. So when these veterans organizations come in, knowing from their own experience, but also looking to the future, it has weight. It has weight. But all of it is important, but the inside maneuvering we do doesn't count unless we have the outside mobilization, when the American people know. That's why the president bringing it to the forefront was so important, and I had a feeling that he would. So I got up when he started talking. My kids were saying, "Mom, why were you standing up?" I said, "I just couldn't contain myself." I was so excited that this was coming, and I like to stand up for veterans anyway. But in any case, I do think that when our colleagues on the other side of the building understand the difference between the two pieces of legislation, we will have common ground on it. And again, just as John said at the end, if we're not willing to pay the price of war, we shouldn't go. When you were talking about Kandahar, I was thinking, when we went to Kandahar one time, we could barely get in there. It was so dangerous. Another time we could walk the streets. Little did we know that on both occasions, the danger was there to our troops, whether it was an intense battle, it was combat or not. The danger was there to our troops. So for them, for their caregivers, for their families, for our country, for who we are and how we respect those who helped make us the home of the brave, the land of the free, we've got to get this done. And we're going to have a big, strong, bipartisan vote to do so. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, again. And thank you, John and John. And just let me say on John, he does make life beautifully miserable by just putting a time frame into it, right? So let's just get it done now.
Well,
whether it was helping our 9/11
why not?
folks.
Why wouldn't we get it done right now?
That's right. Why not? So there we are. It's about time. It's long overdue.
If more women were in charge, no offense, Chairman. I strongly believe that the Speaker has bigger Abraham Lincolns than most men in this town. And when things need to get done, she makes things move. It's that simple.
Well, let's thank all of you, and Rosie, thank you.
I didn't curse. She cursed.
Is that to be
considered? Everybody's wondering if I was going to curse today.
Is that a compliment? Should I take that as a compliment?
It was.
Well, the only person who I saw make our speaker curse almost, she never curses, is, well, you know who. Okay. I don't see any other questions, and I think we got to get to a whip meeting if we still got time, right? So thank you all for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.